Arya Stark came back to Braavos under a borrowed name, on a ship that stank of tar and fish and unasked for questions. The sea was the same restless gray she remembered, churning against the hull. The Titan rose out of the mist as the light failed, colossal and implacable, eyes burning with their usual guttering fires. She stood at the prow in a plain brown cloak, hands tucked into her sleeves as the wind worried at her hair, and did not look away when the Titan's horn bellowed across the water. She had gone west to find what lay beyond the maps, and found only more sea and a scattering of ragged islands where men fought over salt and shellfish, no different from the men she had left behind. Their kings were petty, their cruelties familiar. The edge of the world had not been a waterfall dropping into nothing. It had been more hunger, more fear, more knives in the dark. In the end, she had turned her ship's prow back toward the rising sun because wherever she went, the names went with her. She did not speak them now. The old list was finished. Cersei, the Hound, Polliver, and the Mountain, and the rest. Most of them were dead by someone else's hand or someone else's fire, but dead all the same. It should have meant something. It had for a little while. She had stood in the ruins of King's Landing, ash under her boots and dragon-wing shadow on her face, and watched the last of the Dragon Queen's madness fall beneath Jon's sword. She had watched her brother, no, her cousin, her king, whatever he was now, march away into exile beyond the wall, watched Sansa crowned in the God's Wood at Winterfell with snow in her hair and a circlet on her brow, watched Bran wheeled into a hall still smelling of smoke to hear lords pledge him their swords. They were trying, all of them. They were mending, but the small folk still starved in the riverlands. A child still vanished from a village near the Twins, never to be seen again. Men still whispered about tribute and taxes, about new levies to rebuild walls and fleets. Power had only shifted seats. Its teeth were the same. When the ship slipped under the Titan's shadow and into the purple-lit harbor, Arya touched the iron coin in the pocket of her cloak. It was warm against her fingers, as if it had been waiting. Vala Morgulis, she thought, as the crew shouted and lines were thrown and the stench of Braavos washed over her. All men must die. It had sounded like a joke once, something you said like a password. Now it tasted like simple truth. She left the ship without giving the captain her real name, boots silent on the gangplank. No one tried to stop her. No one watched her for long. The city had its own hungers. Even a lone girl with a travel-worn cloak was no feast. She threaded through the maze of canals and bridges on feet that remembered the way without asking her. Braavos had changed. There were new piers, new statues, the light of different gods flickering in alleyway shrines, but its bones were the same. The House of Black and White loomed at the end of a narrow lane, wedged between taller, brighter warehouses like a stone pulled from some older, colder place and simply dropped here. Its doors were still plain, still unadorned. People still passed them by with quickened steps and eyes that skittered away. Arya stood before the doors, the coin in her palm, and felt 16 again, hungry and angry and desperate to be someone other than herself. She remembered the taste of pigeon as she ate on the steps the first time, the ache in her bruised ribs, the weight of needle hidden up her sleeve. She had no sword now. She had not carried Needle West with her. She had left it in the same place she had once hidden it, behind a loose stone in the cellar of an inn on the quiet isle. She did not know if it was still there. That was a different girl's story. "I came back," she murmured, to no one, to the doors, to the God who watched with many faces. "I finished my list." The doors opened without her knocking. The air inside was cool and smelled of stone and still water and a faint tang of some bitter herb. Torchlight painted the great hall in trembling gold, catching on the faces that stared down from every wall. Old and young, lovely and ruined, dark and pale, 1,000 lives pressed flat and lifeless. Arya stepped in and the door side closed behind her, shutting out the city's noise. She felt them watching her. That had not changed either. She walked forward, boots soft on the stone, until the pool lay before her as black and glassy as she remembered. The candles around it burned with narrow, unwavering flames. "It is you," said a voice from the shadows. "And yet it is not." The kindly man stepped into the light, robes dragging on the floor. His face was not the same as last time. It never was. Today he wore the pale, sagging features of an old Bravosi whose left eye had clouded over. His mouth a thin line bracketed by wrinkles. Only his eyes were familiar, calm and brown and deep. Arya bowed, because that was what the girl she had been had learned to do. "I came to give back what I took," she said, "and to ask for something." "Many come to give," the kindly man said. "Few think to ask." His gaze traveled over her, noting the weather-stained cloak, the worn boots, the new scars white against her throat. "You finished your list, you say?" She nodded. "Those names are dust." "You are certain?" There was no mockery in his tone, only curiosity. "No one left on your tongue when you try to sleep? No one in your dreams?" She thought of a boy with black hair and blue eyes, hammer ringing on steel. Of a queen with red hair standing very straight, hands clasped, listening to men speak of grain. Of a man in a wheeled chair whose gaze seemed always to be elsewhere. "They are not on any list," she said. "Not yet." He smiled faintly. "You have walked far. You have seen what lies beyond the pages men have written. The many-faced God surely walked with you." "I saw too many gods," Arya said. "Every island had its own. They all wanted blood. They all promised the same things." "And what did their kings promise?" His question was very soft. She remembered fires built with driftwood, men shouting, a girl shoved to her knees. She remembered turning away before the knife came down because there had been nothing she could do, because her little ship would have burned if anyone saw her. "The same," she said, "always the same." He nodded, as if she had confirmed something he already knew. "You say you have something to give back." She set the iron coin on her palm and offered it to him. "I am not no one," Arya said. "I never was. I thought I could be, but I was wrong. I'm Arya Stark of Winterfell. I was a fool to pretend I wasn't. That was the debt I owed." She took a breath. "I paid it by leaving, but the coin's still yours." The kindly man regarded the small dull disc on her hand. "You may keep it," he said. She frowned. "I don't want it." "Want?" His lips twitched. "You left here as one who wanted many things. You come back as one who wants something greater. Perhaps we have failed with you, or perhaps we have succeeded." He moved past her to stand at the edge of the water. His reflection bent and wavered. "You spoke of asking," he reminded her. "Ask." Arya stared at the pool's surface. In its black depths she saw flickers. A throne of melted swords. A hall with white roots twisting through the floor. Ships on a storm-torn sea. Faces glimmered there too, so quickly she could not name them. Tyrion's mismatched eyes, Davos's weathered smile, Brienne's jaw clenched in duty, Sansa's mouth pressed thin. "There's a new king in Westeros," she said slowly. "A new queen in the north. The old ones are dead, but their seats aren't. Men still kneel." She lifted her eyes. "I think that was the mistake. It's never just the names. It's the chairs they sit in." "The chairs," he repeated. "The thrones," Arya said. "The crowns, the swords. You taught me that a man is just a man, no more nor less. But a crown makes him something else, or he thinks it does. And you wish to take the crowns away?" The words were mild. The air had gone very still. "I wish to take the heads that wear them," she said. There was no heat in it. She was not the girl who had whispered names into her pillow. The great ones, the powers, all of them, until there's no one left for ordinary people to kneel to butt each other. The kindly man studied her for a long, slow moment. Something like sorrow touched his lined mouth, then faded. "That is not balance," he said. "Death is the only true equality. Touches high and low alike. You would make death a weapon for some, against others. I would make it a weapon against those who keep others in chains," Arya said sharply. "And who will decide which chains are real?" His voice did not rise. "You, a girl from a cold castle far away, with wolf blood in her veins and a taste for vengeance? We do not choose for ourselves, child. We answer those who come to the door. We are not kingslayers, nor queenslayers. We are only servants. She thought of the faces on the wall. Many of them had belonged to men and women who had been something once. The House of Black and White made them equal in the end. It did not pick and choose. Perhaps that was what had drawn her here in the first place, under all the anger. The idea of a place where no one's name mattered. Then you're only half a god, she said quietly. There's no balance if one side keeps getting new swords. That sounds like another creed, the kindly man murmured. One I recall you railing against in your first days here. He cocked his head. You speak of kings and queens as if they are a single body you might cut the head from. But they grow back, Arya Stark. Slice one off, another sprouts. It is not power that sits on a throne. It is the need for someone to sit there. Then I'll kill the need, she said, before she could stop herself. He laughed. It was a soft sound, utterly without malice. Ah, child, kill the need. You do not ask small things. He sobered. There is a reason why we serve the many-faced God and not the other way round. We bend our backs and still our desires because to do otherwise would make us tyrants in a subtler mask than any king. The path you speak of, he closed his eyes for a heartbeat. We have walked it long ago. The stones are slick with what we spilled on them. You failed, Arya said, or you stopped. We learned, he corrected, opening his eyes again. Perhaps you will not need to. Perhaps the scars of this world are different. Or perhaps you will lay down your knives the same way my masters did, and come here seeking a quieter service. He looked at her with something like pity. Ask then, he said again. Ask, and hear the answer. She swallowed. Teach me everything, she said. Not just the tricks with faces, the deeper things, the old things, the ways to walk unseen to unmake. You said once that I might never be ready for all the doors in this house. I want them open, and you will use what lies behind them to eliminate every major power in your home, the kindly man said. Yes, and if your home becomes somewhere else? She had no answer to that. Very well. He dipped his fingers into the black water, then flicked droplets in a slow arc. They spattered across the stone at her feet like dark stars. You may stay, you may learn. The many-faced God will take your service and your skill. If you persist, he may even grant you what you seek. Arya let out a breath she had not known she was holding. You agree. I do not agree, the kindly man said. I accept. Is there a difference? Yes. He smiled again. You will come to understand. Diet. He clasped his hands in his sleeves. You will need to give something more than your coin, Arya Stark. More than your time. You will need to give the last thing you kept from us. She frowned. I gave you my sight once, and took it back. I gave you your name once. His gaze did not waver. Give it back. Cold slid down her spine. Not like fear, but like standing barefooted in Winterfell's godswood. If I give you my name, I'm no one, she said. No, the word was very gentle. You will not be no one. That lie did not hold the first time, and it will not hold now. But if you give me your name, you cannot use it to excuse yourself. Arya Stark would never, he mimicked very softly. Arya Stark must. If you would be more than an angry girl in a borrowed face, you must be willing to be less as well. Give it to me, and I will keep it safe. I will know who you are. The God will know. You need not. You will be what you do. She thought of her father's voice, teaching her to shoot an arrow, of her mother's arms around Bran as he tried to walk, of Jon's warm hand on her head before they had parted, the last time. If she gave her name away, did she give them away too? Or had she already lost them, sailing west into a world that did not know what Stark meant? They'll still be there, she said under her breath, as much to herself as to him. What I remember, you can't take that. I would not if I could, he said. They are the weight that will keep you from floating away entirely. Arya closed her eyes. For a moment she saw herself in the weirwood's eyes. She saw her small hands clutching needle. She saw herself leaping from a hall as it burned, shouting for her brother, inhaling smoke. Those images had always been her tether. Arya Stark. She had held onto that when even her own face had not been hers. She breathed in the scent of still water, stone, old dust. She opened her eyes. "Take it," she said. The kindly man nodded just once. He cupped his hands as if he were catching something she could not see. "I have it," he said. "When you wish it back, you may come and ask." He turned away. "Learn, then. Walk the halls. Listen to the silence between the walls. Serve those who come to our door. When you think you are ready to unmake your world, we will see if you truly are." Years passed. She did not count them. They peeled away the layers she had built without knowing. The little girl who had run wild with a prince, the scullion who had scrubbed tables at an inn by the crossroads, the wolf girl who had chewed raw meat in a warlord's hall, the girl who had whispered names into the dark as if they were spells. Under each they found another self and taught it how to die. They taught her how to listen to the way a city breathed, how to walk through a riot without being touched, how to stand in a room and pull men's eyes where she wished with the tilt of her head or the drop of her voice. They taught her that a face was more than skin. It was posture, accent, the way a hand reached for a cup, the tempo of a laugh. They taught her to kill quickly and slowly, from afar and up close, with poison and with words. They taught her things she did not have words for. How to move between moments until the world seemed just a little slower. How to step into a dream someone else was having and whisper. Maybe that part was only story. She was never sure. Sometimes she woke from such lessons with tears on her face, certain she had been back in Winterfell's yard. Snow in her hair, Bran's choked laughter in her ears as she helped him stand. Sometimes she woke with her hands clenched as if they had been around a throat. The kindly man did not ask whom she had been strangling in her sleep. He simply put a bowl of water before her and told her to drink. News of Westeros reached the House of Black and White in fragments and murmurs. A merchant seeking the death of a rival complained overmuch of tariffs from King's Landing. A woman whose husband had died building a new fleet cursed the queen in the north for demanding ships from her poor harbor. A Lyseni Bravo bragged of fighting in the disputed lands alongside Westerosi sellswords, swearing their new king wanted no more foreign wars. Names pricked Arya's ears like thorns. Bran the Broken, who sent gold but no men. Sansa Stark, whose envoys bargained harder than any Bravosi. Yara Greyjoy, whose raiders still harried the stepstones in defiance of some treaty. They were trying, she thought again, listening from the shadows as the kindly man named prices. But each choice they made for the good of their people squeezed someone else somewhere else. That was the way of it. One day a man came to the black doors in a cloak lined with fur so fine even Bravosi winter could not touch him. His rings were heavy with jewels. His hair was oiled. His mouth was thin. He poured out his tale at the pool, tears streaking his painted cheeks. Some Westerosi wolf queen, he said, had forbidden his ships from cutting timber on a certain shore, claiming some ancient right. His prophets were bleeding away. He wanted her dead. Arya watched from the darkness as the kindly man listened without changing expression. When the man was done, breath hitching, the kindly man simply inclined his head. "The god is not a blade for hire," he said, "nor is he a judge in your disputes. We relieve suffering. We do not shift it." "Suffering?" The man bristled. "My houses are full," the kindly man said. "Your belly is round. There is ink under your nails, not dirt. You may make your offerings elsewhere." His tone was utterly polite. "The many-faced god will not be used so." After the man left, furious, Arya stepped from her post, face borrowed from some city waif. "He would have paid well," she said. "He would have," the kindly man agreed. "And if the North loses ships, its people suffer." The North's queen made her choice. He dipped a rag into the pool and wrung it out. "You would unmake the crowns, child, not take orders from them." "I would unmake the crowns," she echoed. The words sat in her mouth like a stone. "Do you think she's happy?" "Who?" "Sansa, the queen in the north." He folded the damp cloth carefully. "Do you think the shard of yourself that once looked in her mirror was ever happy in any crown? She never wore one when I knew her. Arya said. She only dreamed of them. Dreams are heavier than metal when they break, he said. That night, Arya lay awake on her pallet and watched the flicker of candlelight on the low ceiling. She tried to picture Sansa in a fur-lined cloak like the merchants, rings on her fingers, a crown in her red hair. She could not. Every time the image formed, it dissolved into memory. Sansa in King's Landing, eyes too wide. Sansa on the battlements of Winterfell, breath white in the air, jaw clenched so tight Arya had heard her teeth grind. Eliminate every major power, she had said once. It had been half a thought, half a dare. But the world had not stopped making kings and queens just because she had gotten on a boat. If anything, it had made them more quickly, as if filling holes. She turned on her side and closed her eyes. The house did not send her to Westeros at once. There were debts to settle elsewhere. A tyrant in Myr who had flayed beggars for sport. A Volantine high priest who had grown too fond of the coin collected in his god's name. A younkish slaver who branded children for mischief. Arya walked among them all with other people's faces and let the gods' justice fall. Sometimes there was balance. Sometimes their deaths started small wars. She watched. She learned. She felt herself thinning out like paper held to a flame. When at last the summons came, it was not from the kindly man. She found the girl in the Hall of Faces. She had not heard her enter, had not felt the air stir. One moment the hall was empty save for Arya and the watching dead. The next the girl was there, narrow and sharp, with eyes as gray as a northern sky and hair the color of old straw. She wore no mask. Her feet made no sound on the floor. "Your sisters and brothers have done what they can?" the girl said, voice graveled with more years than her skin showed. "They have cut and trimmed, bled and bandaged. The patient refuses to heal. Perhaps it is time for a different sort of surgery." Arya's hand went to her belt out of habit, searching for a dagger that was not there. "Who are you?" she asked. The girl looked at her with something like amusement. "Do you not recognize me?" Arya stared. There was nothing familiar in the features, but something in the way the girl held her head, in the way her mouth twitched as if at some private joke. "The many-faced god has no face," Arya said. "Nor has he one voice," the girl replied. "Sometimes he speaks through old men, and sometimes through little girls, and sometimes through the slow rot of a wooden beam. Today you may hear him as me." She spread her arms a little, encompassing the walls. "You asked to unmake your world. You offered much. You have learned enough not to think it easy. Do you still desire this?" Arya thought of Sansa, of Bran, of the way the people in the Riverlands still flinched when they heard hooves. She thought of the merchant who would have bought a queen's death with fat hands. She thought of her own fingers around the hilt of a knife, of the way the world narrowed to the width of a throat in moments like that. "Yes," she said. The girl nodded. "Rise, then, faceless daughter. Your god makes you his queen." The word hit her like a blow. "No," Arya said before she could stop it. "I'm not a queen." The girl's mouth quirked. "What is a queen but one who chooses, who orders, whose will shapes the lives of others? You would shape the world, Arya Stark, even if you pretend otherwise. You walked from your home because you refused to be beaten into the shapes it wanted. You came here because you wanted to learn how to be the hand that strikes, not the neck that bends." "I came here to kill," Arya snapped. "So do kings and queens," the girl said calmly. "They only do it from higher chairs." Her gaze sharpened. "You would do it from no chair at all. That is a more dangerous throne than any your world has known." Arya's breath felt tight in her chest. "I don't want anyone kneeling to me." "They will not kneel," the girl said. "They will fear. They will whisper stories of a shadow that wears any face, that moves among them unseen, that topples lords and kings. They will call you what they like. Some will call you monster. Some will call you savior. Some, drunk on their own cleverness, will call you the faceless queen." The title sat in the air between them like a knife waiting to fall. "No crown," Arya said. "No crown," the girl agreed. "Only work." She smiled, small and sharp. "Will you take it?" Arya's hand drifted. this time to the place on her chest where her name had lived. It felt hollow there, as if the bone were thinner. "What will you take from me?" she asked. "Nothing you have not already given," the girl said. "We will lend it back from time to time. A face here, a memory there. Enough that you know what you are breaking when you break it. And when I'm done?" The girl's gaze went to the faces on the wall. "When you are done, if you are ever done, perhaps there will be no more kings for a while." She lifted a shoulder. "Perhaps the world will learn to arrange itself differently. Or perhaps all you will have done is sweep the board for a new game. That is not your concern. Your concern is the work." Arya thought of old Nan's stories, of heroes who had slain monsters, only for worse ones to crawl from their corpses. She thought of the long summer that had lulled the south into forgetting winter existed at all. She thought of the Night King shattering under her knife, of the way the air had gone still afterward. The work, she thought. She had been running toward and away from it all her life. "I'll need a list," she said. The girl's smile widened. "Ah, that you can make yourself." In the weeks that followed, Arya sat in a small cell with a flat stone and a bowl of ink and began to write. She did not write the names she had once whispered. Those were ghosts she had made peace with or watched die. These names she pulled from the quiet. Scraps of conversation at the house's door, half-heard stories in Bravosi taverns, reports from the Iron Bank. She thought like a spider now, tracing threads. Bran, she wrote, then hesitated. Bran the Broken, king of the Six Kingdoms. Sansa Stark, queen in the north. They were not the same as Cersei or Joffrey. They had known fear, had bled. They were trying. She left space beside their names and moved on. Yara Greyjoy, she wrote. Lady of the Iron Islands. She remembered Yara laughing in Winterfell's hall, tankard raised, rain in her hair. She remembered Yara's ships hauling food to the north when the snow had been deepest. Gendry Baratheon, Lord of Storm's End. Her hand shook at that one. She set the quill down until it steadied. Edmure Tully, Lord of Riverrun. Some greasy cousin of Walder Frey, raised to Lord of the Crossing. A lord in the Vale who had been 8 when Littlefinger fell and had grown into a colder kind of spider in the Ares high halls. A Dornish prince with sharp eyes and a softer hand. She remembered his name from Sansa's letters once, hers and Jon's, when such things had still been sent. Lords with charters and titles. Priests with flocks. She filled the stone and had to send for another. Each name was a knot. Behind each knotted a web of duty and cruelty and compromise. She did not delude herself that cutting one would untangle everything. She had spent too long watching the world for that. But if she cut enough, quickly enough, from enough angles at once, she brought the first stone to the kindly man. He read it without lifting his eyes to hers. Ambitious, he said mildly. You said kings grow back. Not if one takes the soil from under them. He tapped one long finger beside Bran's name. Some of these are harder than others. I know where they sleep, Arya said. At least some of them. He looked up. Do you now? Does your god? I don't need a god, she said before thinking. I was there. He smiled in that familiar, gentle way that always made her feel both small and vast at once. That, too, is dangerous. The first to fall was not a king, nor a queen, nor a prince. It was a man who collected them. The Iron Bank sat squat and serene at the heart of Braavos, its walls thick, its windows narrow. Men and women went in and out all day, merchants in fine cloth, ship captains still smelling of tar, envoys from far shores with guards at their backs. Money flowed through it like blood through a heart. Arya had been there before, once, as a child in dirty clothes, watching from a distance as Tycho Nestoris had ridden out in his carriage. She remembered thinking he looked like a crow in fine wool, sharp and patient. It had been years since she had thought of him. Now his successor's name sat near the top of her stone. The master of the Iron Bank did not rule like a king. He ruled like winter, quietly, relentlessly, from every direction at once. Kingdoms that did not pay their debts found themselves strangled not with swords but with empty chests. She went to him as a clerk. No one looked twice at a new clerk, especially one with smudged ink on her fingers and downcast eyes. She learned the rhythms of the place. When the master took his meals, when he received envoys, when he pored over ledgers. She carried parchments to his office and picked up discarded scraps and listened. His name was Maros Anteryen. He had never seen Westeros. He did not care who sat which throne, so long as the vaults were full and men kept coming to bow in his narrow office. Once, she heard him tell a younger banker that kings were like horses. You saddled the strongest. He was a careful man. He tasted his wine only after a servant did. He slept behind warded doors. Arya learned the locks, the routes of the guards, the places where the old stone foundations were weakest. She killed him on a sunny afternoon in his office with his own hand. She came to him as a visiting lord from the disputed lands, face broader, shoulders thicker under heavy velvet. She spoke with a Myrish accent she had worn for 2 years on another job. She let him see the thickness of the purse at her belt. I come with an offer, she said. The master of the bank was not a tall man. He sat behind a desk piled with neat stacks of parchment, his inkstone placed just so. He glanced at her with pale, flat eyes and motioned for her to sit. Offers are best in writing, he said. Some are better in whispers, she replied, leaning forward. I intend to carve myself a kingdom. There are more of us each year, the sellswords and captains who tire of fighting for others. Why not fight for ourselves? You backed Stannis Baratheon once. You know the value of a good gamble. He studied her. Men like him never stopped calculating. That was their weakness and their strength. And what do you offer our institution in return for this kingdom? She smiled, showing bad teeth carefully made. Ports, timber, silver from the mountains I mean to seize. Enough to pay off whatever coin Westeros still owes you and then some. He tapped his fingers on the desk. Westeros remains a useful debtor. It teaches the others that even the proud must bow. Why should we remove such a lesson? Because they bind you as yo. You bind them, she thought, because as long as your ledgers are fat with their names, you will always have a reason to keep their throne standing. Aloud she said, because the new king is not like the old. He understands what it means to break a wheel. He may yet learn how to break you. The banker's mouth thinned. The iron bank does not break. Then it rusts, she said, letting a hint of mockery in. Do you think you're the only game in town? There are priests in Volantis who claim their god forgives all debts if you only burn for him. They have a way of making converts. There are magisters in Pentos who'd see your vaults emptied if it would keep their own full. You sit very sure in your chair, Master Anteryen. I wonder if you've looked under it recently. He frowned, finally unsettled. Good. You suggest? He shook his head, impatient with himself for being drawn into the picture she painted. It does not matter. You are one man, however enterprising. You are not a realm. You can be killed. She leaned forward. So can you. He blinked. She moved. His hand went to the bell rope beside his desk. Her hand went to hers. Her fingers closed around his wrist with precise force, twisting. Bones cracked. He opened his mouth, not in a shout but a sharp breath of pain, and she brought his own little penknife up under his jaw. Quiet, she said, almost kindly. You were right. Anyone can be killed. His eyes bulged. Blood pulsed against the knife, hot across her knuckles. She held firm until his struggles weakened, until his breath rattled, until his ink-stained fingers slid from her sleeve. When it was done, she laid him gently forward across his desk. His face settled against a ledger full of numbers and notes about interest. Blood crept along the lines, smudging them. She wiped the knife on his sleeve, set it back where he had kept it, straightened her borrowed cloak, and walked out. By the time anyone found him, she was another clerk in another hallway, sobbing convincingly into her hands. The Iron Bank did not topple overnight. It did not even falter. Its clerks and counselors convened. They named a new master within the month. But there was a tremor under the marble floors now, a murmur in the taverns. If the master was not untouchable, perhaps the bank was not either. Perhaps the world was not as fixed as men like to think. Arya watched the new master receive his first Westerosi envoy from a corner, invisible in a servant's skin. The envoy was a middle-aged man with gray at his temples and ink on his fingers, wearing the badge of King's Landing's Master of Coin. "Tyrion Lannister sends his regards," he said, voice careful. "The king is most grateful for your continued patience." Patience, Arya thought, tasting the word. That patience had built lending houses in every port, had underwritten wars and famines and rebuildings. That patience had made kings bold, knowing there was always one more loan. She watched the new master incline his head and say the same words his predecessor had said 100 times. "The Iron Bank will have its due, not while I am working," she thought. Her list did not grow shorter. Every name she cut seemed to breed 3 more. Power shifted, regrouped, sprouted new faces. But she had not expected the work to be simple. She had not asked for simple. She went to Westeros wearing a sailor's face, a mercenary's face, a pious sept's face. Each time she stepped onto one of its shores, everything in her seemed to sharpen. The air felt different here, colder even at the height of summer. The light slanted differently across the fields. The smell of wet earth and old stones slid under whatever mask she wore and touched the part of her that was still a girl with a wooden sword. The first of the great powers she killed was not the one she expected. She had thought it would be Yara. The Iron Islands had always been wolves' enemies. The Greyjoys took what they pleased from the shore and the sea. Even now, with the war won and the dead gone, their longships harried the shipping lanes. She had heard of villages on the western coast burned in raids, of fishermen taken to row in chains. Yara had once stood beside Theon on Winterfell's battlements and said she would fight for the living. She had kept that promise when it had mattered most. Perhaps she thought it gave her a right to plunder afterward. Arya went among the Isles as a salt wife at first, barefoot, hair in ragged braids, a faded tattoo at her throat. She listened. She watched Yara from a distance. At the oars, at the prow, in the smoky longhouses where men drank and slapped her back. The Iron Queen was older now. The streaks of white in her dark hair stood out against her sunburned face. She laughed often. She listened more than she spoke. When a thrall complained of a master's cruelty, Arya saw her eyes narrow and heard her say, "Free him and give his owner a taste of the chains he loved so much." Not simple, then. Never simple. On a wet, wind-snarled night, Arya slipped into Yara's hall in yet another face. A priest of the drowned god, robes dripping. She had watched the real one for days to learn his gait, the way he chewed his words. She filled a bowl with seawater at the shore, whispered the gods low, bubbling prayers over it as she walked. "Priest." Yara's voice came rough from smoke and ale. "You are late. The storm." "The god is never late," Arya intoned. "He comes in his own tides." She lifted the bowl. "You knew this once, daughter of Balan. You have forgotten." That stung. Yara's jaw tightened. "I have forgotten nothing. You swore upon the waves to serve your people," Arya said. "You swore to feed them, to protect them from foreign swords. Yet I smell southern gold on your fingers and hear southern curses in your halls. You raid for coin now, not for salt. You break oaths you swore in the surf when you were a girl. Do you think the god does not see?" Yara snorted. "If he does, he's welcome to spit on my head. He gave me a realm drowning in the debts my father left and the ruin Euron made. If I feed my people with southern gold, what of it? They cannot eat honor." "They cannot eat you either," Arya said. "But some might like to see you drown to pay his price." Her eyes narrowed. "What game is this, priest?" "No game," Arya thought. "Only a story shaped to fit the hole in your armor." Aloud she said, "Come to the shore. Put your head beneath the waves again. Remember the taste of salt." Men and women had gathered now, drawn by the raised voices. Their faces were worn by wind and salt and hard living. Some watched Yara with devotion, some with wariness, some with the kind of hunger that looked for weakness. "Is this necessary?" one of her captains muttered. We have storms enough. You would gainsay the god? Arya snapped, letting the priest's fanatic edge into her tone. He asks little, a breath, a bow, a reminder. Yara's face closed. For a heartbeat, Arya thought she would laugh and throw the bowl back in her face. Then something, pride perhaps, or the old superstition, moved. Yara jerked her head. Very well, she said. We'll give him his reminder. Come on then, you squids. Let's drown together. They surged down to the shore, a ragged, torchlit procession. The sea was a black beast roaring against the rocks. Spray lashed Arya's borrowed face. She went out knee-deep, the cold cutting like knives. Yara came with her, boots splashing, teeth bared. Do your work? She shouted over the waves. Arya lifted the bowl. What is dead may never. Words, old words. She let them roll from her tongue. But rises again, harder and stronger. She reached out with hands that had strangled and soothed, that had learned to feel the place where life clung. She set the bowl aside. It did not matter. She needed both hands and laid her palms on either side of Yara's head. In his name, she said. She shoved her under. The sea did half the work. The waves seized Yara, slammed her down. She fought, of course she fought. She was iron-born, her limbs corded with muscle. She thrashed, twisting, strong. Arya held her, fingers hooked under her jaw, thumbs behind her ears, using the water's own weight. Salt filled Yara's nose, her mouth. The torchlight above fractured into wild streaks as her vision shattered. Men on the shore shouted. Some laughed, caught up in the right. Some sounded uneasy. It had always been a dangerous ritual, half drowning their own. They expected the priest to pull her up. They expected her to cough and spit and stagger upright to cheers. That was the story. Arya waited one heartbeat longer than the story allowed. Then another. Then another. When she raised Yara, the Iron Queen's head lolled, water spilling from her mouth. For a heartbeat, the shore was silent, the waves sucking at the rocks. She is with him now, Arya said, and let the body fall. The shouts came then. Fury, disbelief, horror. Men splashed into the waves, dragging Yara's body up, pounding her chest. Someone grabbed Arya's robes. You've killed her, he choked. You mad old eel. She was claimed, Arya said, voice steady through the priest's larynx. He wanted her back. Who are you to say nay to the god's own hand? Madness, they muttered. Sacrilege. But beneath it there was fear. If the god could take their queen so easily, what else could he take? It did not take long for the first knife to flash. The captain who had always bristled at Yara's commands, who had lost brothers under her orders, who had hated the way she had bent to Westerosi treaties, saw his chance. He spat and said, she was soft. She was turning us into dock keepers with crowns. Better a true ironborn than a woman who half-loved the green lands. He drove his axe into the back of the man pounding Yara's chest. Chaos followed. Old rivalries erupted. The hall that night stank of blood and smoke. In the morning, there were 3 men calling themselves king. By the week's end, there were 5. Arya watched from the shadows, invisible in a thrall's face, as the Iron Islands tore themselves apart. Ships burned in petty harbors instead of foreign coasts. The raids dwindled. Men stayed home to kill each other. Not balance, perhaps, but a shift. Stories spread. A queen drowned by her own priest for angering her god. Some said she had betrayed the old ways. Others said she had been their last hope of holding the isles together. In taverns on the mainland, fishermen crossed themselves when a priest of the drowned god walked by. In King's Landing, a raven brought the news to the small council. Arya was there for that, too. She came as a kitchen girl this time, slipping into the Red Keep's rebuilt halls with a basket of turnips on her hip. She moved easily among the servants, a wisp of a thing, eyes polite, accent from no particular place. Servants saw many things and were seen seldom. King's Landing was different. The streets had been swept, the rubble carted away, new buildings raised with clean white stone. The bell towers were gone, their echoes swallowed. In the distance, Scaffolds clung to the broken dome of the Great September where it had remained, a jagged memorial. The city still smelled of piss and sweat and smoke, but there was a new note beneath it. Fresh-cut timber, paint, the tang of lime. The Red Keep had lost some of its teeth. The melted ruin of the throne room had been cleared and rebuilt. The razored swords of Aegon's chair melted further into a lower, simpler seat. Bran sat it seldom. He preferred a wheeled chair of plain wood, the old maester said, with a cushion behind his crooked back. He rolled himself in and out of council meetings, eyes distant, fingers resting on polished armrests. Arya saw him all in now as she slipped along the wall with her basket. Tyrion stood at the foot of the council table, a sheaf of parchment in his good hand. His bad one curled at his side. He was grayer, the lines at his eyes deeper, but his gaze was as sharp as ever. Samwell Tarly, broad as a door, shuffled his notes as Grand Maester. Brienne of Tarth stood by the door in gilded armor, the cloak of the Kingsguard bright over her shoulders. Davos leaned on the table with his scarred hands, listening. A thin, clever woman Arya did not know sat with oil-stained fingers where Varys had once perched. That would be the new master of Whisperers, or whatever they called it now. Bronn lounged with his boots up, still improbably wearing a lord's rings. The raven's arrival cut through their low conversation. The bird landed on its perch with a rattle of wings, shaking off rain. "From Pike, your grace," the maester at the door called. "Read it," Bran said. His voice had changed, Arya noted. It was firmer than she remembered, though still flat, the way a quiet river current can drag a man under. The maester broke the seal and scanned the parchment. His face twitched. "Well?" Tyrion demanded. "It seems Queen Yara is dead," the maester said. "Drowned in some ritual. There is dispute as to the succession." Tyrion closed his eyes briefly. "Of course there is. Do we aid one of them?" Bronn asked. "Pick the least bad squid and throw him a rope?" "Whoever we aid will be seen as our creature," Davos said. "The others will unite just long enough to gut him. Perhaps they will simply gut each other," the woman with oil-stained fingers said, "which would save us the trouble." "While they do," Sam put in, "their longships will harry every coast from the Arbor to the north. The small folk will suffer, as they always do." "Yara was reasonable," Tyrion said softly. "As reasonable as any Greyjoy can be. She kept her captains on a short leash. If she's gone, the old ways are asserting themselves," the master of Whisperers said. "You know what their priests are like. Fanatics. If word spreads that the god himself took her, there will be no more treaties." Bran listened, hands still. His eyes had that far look Arya remembered from Winterfell's Godswood, as if he were looking at something only he could see. "What does it look like, then?" Tyrion asked. "In your green dreams, or whatever you want to call them. Are we about to be up to our necks in Ironborn, or will the Isles burn themselves out?" Bran's gaze slid toward the window. For a moment, Arya felt something brush against her, like the ghost of a feather. She froze. Did he sense her? Could he, under the weight of the faces she wore? "Fire," Bran said slowly. "And salt. The tide going out. Farther than it has gone in a long time." "Which is it?" Bran said. "Are they sailing or sinking?" Bran's lips twitched. "Sometimes you cannot tell until the tide begins to turn back in." Tyrion threw up his hands. "Helpful as ever." Arya edged closer, the basket of turnips digging into her hip. She kept her head down, eyes on the rushes. If Bran could see her through walls, through skin, through masks, he gave no sign. "We will send an envoy," he said after a heartbeat. "A good one. Davos, perhaps. He speaks their language better than most, and they respect him. We will remind them what we agreed. But we will also move a few galleys north. Quietly. We cannot afford another war. And if war comes anyway?" Brienne asked. "Then we will meet it," Bran said, his voice as level as stone. "But not with dragonfire. Never again." They murmured agreement. Tyrion made a note. The council shifted to other matters: grain levies, bridge repairs, a border dispute in the Reach. Arya slipped out, her heart pounding. She watched them for days in different skins. A guardsman nodding over his spear, a scribe with cramped fingers, a scullion scrubbing trenchers. She watched Bran roll himself through the gardens in the evening, eyes distant. She watched Sansa's envoys argue in the council chamber, voices sharp but civil. She watched Tyrion drink less than he once had, his jokes quieter. She watched Brienne stare at the new throne as if waiting for it to sprout knives again. They were trying, she thought again. This time the phrase felt tired. Trying was something you said of a man who bailed water from a sinking ship with a cup. They had patched the holes they could see. The sea was bigger than they were. Her list burned at the back of her mind like a brand. It was not enough to kill those who used power cruelly. They would always exist. It was not enough to topple those who held it precariously. The empty chairs invited new occupants. She needed to make crowns too frightening to wear. The stories about the drowned queen had already begun. The Ironborn would tell them around smoky fires, embroidering details. How the priest had dragged her under for defying the god. How she had coughed up seawater that turned to blood. How her eyes had opened white. Some would say they had seen shapes in the waves. If rulers across Westeros began to die in ways that could not be dismissed as chance. If every lord who grew too rich too quickly, every queen who bent too easily, every priest who made his god a cudgel, began to feel the cold of invisible fingers, fear was as much a chain as love. Perhaps it could be turned. She started small. A minor lord in the Reach who beat peasants for looking him in the eye fell ill one night and never rose. A master of tolls on the Mander, grown fat on coin he skimmed, choked to death on a fishbone with a kitchen girl at his shoulder. A knight in the Westerlands whose men had started calling themselves lions again fell from his horse during a hunt when the girth strap of his saddle snapped. The leather had been good. No one could. LD explain it. Rumors spread. Old women muttered that the stranger walked more briskly these days. The faith of the Seven lost a little of its sheen. Some pilgrims turned aside to light candles at older shrines. She let the first great house fall into her shadow not by killing its head, but by cutting its roots. Riverrun had changed hands too many times during the wars. By the time Edmure Tully came home for good, his hair shot with white, the lands around were a patchwork of burned fields and grudges. He ruled as best he could, striving to be his uncle's heir in more than name. He heard disputes. He forgave where he could and punished where he must. But he had grown timorous with the years, wary of any choice that smelled of risk. He let minor lords in his riverlands squabble over water rights and grazing in the hopes they would tire themselves out. They did not. Their feuds choked the roads and fields, strangling trade. Arya walked his lands as a healer 1 month, as a blacksmith's apprentice the next. She watched men come to blows over inches of bank. She watched Edmure sit at his high seat and try to make peace with a voice that never quite rose above a tired murmur. He had once been a joke in her childhood stories, the uncle who always shot wide of the mark. There was something tragic in the way he still sought to please everyone and pleased no one. Killing him would do little. Another cautious lord would rise. The river would stay dammed. So she took his son, not by death. The boy was 7, serious for his years, fond of fishing in the moat. She had seen him there many times, legs swinging over the stone, line dangling, eyes intent on the water. She had been 7 once and wild with the same need to move. She came to him as a traveling singer. She had a lute on her back and a handful of old songs in her mouth. She played in the hall. She played in the yard. She listened to gossip gather like flies around spilled beer. The boy came to her on the 3rd day. "Can you sing about knights?" he demanded. She smiled down at him, adjusting the weathered face she wore. "I can sing about boys who thought they were knights," she said, "and kings who forgot they were men. Which do you want?" He wrinkled his nose, considering. "Both." She gave him both. She gave him the story of a boy who had been told all his life he would be lord of a castle. who had believed it so firmly that when the day came he found he did not know how to do anything but sit in the chair. She gave him a story of another boy who had been sent to foster in a far city and had learned to mend nets, to listen to fishwives, to move through a crowd without being noticed. The boy in the city went back to his castle when his father died. She sang, fingers plucking, voice soft. And he had learned that he was still himself without the chair. So when the men came to him with their complaints, he did not listen only to the loudest. He remembered the fishwives who had shouted over each other in the market and the boy who had fetched water in the heat of day. He remembered the value of a net mended where no one saw. He ruled as if he were still in the city, and it made all the difference. The boy listened with wide eyes. She saw his hand move unconsciously, as if testing the weight of the idea. "That's stupid?" a girl said from the shadows. Some cousin, standing with her arms folded. "Lords don't mend nets." "They might," Arya said, smiling, "if they wanted their fish to keep coming in." The boy frowned. "I could," he said slowly. "I could go to a city, learn things." His cousin snorted. "Your father would never allow it." "Your father might surprise you," Arya said. She was in the hall that night when the boy spoke up at dinner. "Father," he said suddenly, as a servant poured thin stew into his bowl. "My tutor says I know enough letters. I want to see how other people live, in Fairmarket, or even farther." Edmure looked taken aback. "You will see enough when you travel your holdings as lord," he said. "There's danger on the roads. Bandits. There will be more if I don't know how to deal with them," the boy insisted. "Uncle Brinden used to ride the borders." "You said." His voice shook, but he kept going. "I want to learn. I can't just sit here and listen to men shout about fish. I want to hear the fish talk." The hall laughed. Edmure did not. His gaze flicked to the singer at the side of the room. Arya dropped her eyes, her fingers never faltering on the strings. "You are too young," he began. "I was younger when the dead came," the boy said, surprising them all. "You told me I was old enough not to be afraid then. Am I too young now for this?" Silence fell. Men shifted, uncomfortable. Edmure's shoulders slumped. "You sound like your uncle," he said softly. "Very well. Perhaps a season in Fairmarket, under the eye of Lord Mallister. We will talk of it with your mother." The boy grinned, sudden and bright. "Thank you, father." Arya left the next day, never looking back. Years from then, when the boy returned from his wanderings with calluses on his palms and a new set to his jaw, he would begin to pull power from the smaller lords back into his hands. He would cut through their petty wars with a sharper knife than his father's. He would see the small folk not as a distant flock but as faces. He would not be a perfect lord, but he would be something different from what the Riverlands had known. That, too, was a kind of unmaking. Yet for every slow shift like that, there was a name on her stone that would not answer to such gentle nudging. She dreamed of Sansa before she saw her. In the dream, Winterfell's hall was full of faces she did not know. Men with the crests of new-made houses on their chests. Women with hard eyes sitting where once the Karstarks or Umbers had. Sansa sat on the high seat in gray and white and red, her hair braided with small pieces of bone. Snow fell through the broken patches of roof even though she knew, in the logically absurd way of dreams, that the hall had been fully repaired. "Tell me a story," Sansa said. Arya stood below the dais with a wolf's head in her hands. "What kind?" "A true one," Sansa said. "I am tired of lies." Arya opened her mouth. No sound came out. Sansa smiled, slow and sad. "You cannot," she said. "You have made yourself nothing but lies." Arya woke with her heart hammering and the taste of snow in her mouth. She went north in early autumn. The trees wore gold. The air smelled of frost to come. Winterfell's walls rose from the hills as they always had, black against the sky, banners snapping. Wolves' heads flew where they belonged. Smoke curled from chimneys. The gods would huddled inside its enclosure, red leaves whispering. She stood on a rise at dawn and watched the castle wake. Men moved along the battlements, stamping their feet. Smoke thickened. A bell rang somewhere, calling men to break their fast. She had not meant to come. Not yet. There were easier names to cut, safer ones. A Dornish prince whose temper scorched. A Vale lord too fond of pushing lesser men from the moon door. But her feet had turned northward of their own accord. Some knots could not be left to tighten. She entered with a caravan of traders, wrapped in a fur-lined cloak. Her borrowed face that of a woman past her first youth but not yet old, with freckles and a northern burr in her voice. No one looked twice. Winterfell smelled of ash and hot bread and dog. The courtyards rang with hammers and voices. She saw fewer boys drilling with swords than she remembered. More men and women in simple mail, their movements brisk. There were new grain stores, their doors banded thick. A new stone building near the granaries that looked very much like a counting house. Sansa's work. She saw her sister for the first time in years in the Great Hall. Sansa sat on the high seat under the carved direwolves, a gray gown flowing around her, the crown of the queen in the north resting light on her hair. It was not a heavy crown, not golden and spiked. It was leather and silver, shaped like interlocking leaves and branches. She wore it as if it weighed as much as stone. Her face had changed. The lines around her mouth were deeper. There were faint smudges under her eyes. But her gaze was steady, moving over the hall with a ruler's practiced sweep. Arya slipped among the small folk gathered to petition. A man from Last Hearth complaining of broken fences. A woman whose husband had been taken for poaching on a new lord's land. A boy sent to ask for more seed. Sansa heard them all. She asked questions. She knew names. She had built something here, Arya saw that. She had woven all the jagged northern pieces into a cloth that at least covered most of the holes. But there were holes. When the man from Last Hearth spoke, she heard resentment in his voice. Not just at his neighbor, but at the southern traders who had come north with their spices and silk, at the taxes Sansa had levied to keep the granaries full. When the poacher's wife cried, Arya heard not just grief but anger that land once wild and free now belonged to someone. After the petitions, Sansa retired to a smaller solar with a handful of close advisors. An older woman with the look of a steward, a quiet man who spoke rarely but whom everyone listened to when he did, a lady from White Harbor. Arya became a serving woman, carrying bread and honey, and stood against the wall as they spoke. "We cannot lower the levies," the steward was saying. "If the winter comes early, we will be glad of every grain." "I know," Sansa said, rubbing her temples. "But they do not see the winter. They see only their empty cupboards now." "Then show them the winter," the man murmured. She looked at him. "You speak as if I have my brother's eyes." "You have your own," he said mildly. "They see enough." Later, alone, Sansa went to the Godswood. Arya followed at a distance, wearing another woman's face now, older, stooped, with a basket of spun wool on her arm. The guards at the gate let her pass with only a nod. No one barred the Godswood to the folk of the castle. The weirwood stood as it always had, its white limbs twisted, its red leaves whispering. The carved face in its trunk watched with bleeding eyes. Snow dusted its roots. Sansa knelt before it, careful of her skirts. "I am trying," she said, voice low. There was no one else in the grove but Arya. But Sansa spoke as if to someone she could see. "I am doing what I can. I know it's not enough." The leaves rustled. Or perhaps it was only the wind. "Tell me what I am missing," she whispered. Arya stepped out from behind a slender birch. "You never liked being told," she said. Sansa froze. Slowly, she turned her head. Arya let the borrowed face slip away. It was always hardest now to find her own. She had to summon each piece. The shape of her jaw, the set of her mouth, the scar above her brow. It settled over her like an old cloak. Sansa's breath left her in a rush. She surged to her feet. For a moment, Arya thought she would run to her. For a moment, she thought she would call the guards. Instead, Sansa stood very still. "Arya," she said. It was a simple word. It sounded like a prayer dragged over broken glass. Arya inclined her head. "Sansa." The silence between them was thick. Once they had filled it with bickering and childish boasts. with whispered secrets under blankets. Now it was full of the weight of things unsaid. "You're thinner," Sansa said at last, "and older." "Of course you are. Gods." Her hand lifted, fell. "Where have you been?" "Bravos," Arya said. "Other places. West." Sansa nodded slowly, as if she had guessed that much and was only ticking it off a list. "Why are you here?" "To kill you," Arya did not say. The words lodged in her throat like bone. "To see home," she said instead. "To see you." "I wrote," Sansa said. "I know." Arya had seen the letters in the house, dropped by men who carried messages for trade. She had never opened one. "You never wrote back." "I was learning to be no one," Arya said. "No one writes letters." Sansa's mouth twisted. "No one leaves sisters to wonder if they fell off the edge of the world." Arya had no answer for that. They stood a few paces apart, both of them within reach of the old trees spreading roots. The face in the bark watched, silent. "Your queen," Arya said. Sansa shrugged, the motion jerky. The North needed someone. Bran needed a stable realm in the South. "Jon." "I don't know what Jon needed." She swallowed. "It seemed the best choice at the time." "Is it?" Arya asked. Sansa's gaze snapped to her. "Do you mean for the North? Or for me?" "Both. In the North, people are fed." Sansa's chin lifted. "They die less often in someone else's war. The lords grumble, but they grumbled before. For me," she looked away. "I wanted songs once. I wanted my name in them. It turns out that being sung of and being stared at every time you walk into a hall are very different things." "You could abdicate," Arya said bluntly. "Give it to someone else." "And who would that be?" Sansa asked. "One of the Karstarks with more pride than sense? A Manderly with more fish than food? There is no one else the lords would accept, not without carving the North into smaller pieces again. We have had enough of that." "You could teach them to accept someone else," Arya said. Sansa laughed then, sharply. "Like you." "Yes," Arya said. The word surprised even her. "Someone like me. Someone who doesn't want it." "Oh, Arya." Sansa's eyes were bright. "You don't think your not wanting power makes you safe to hold it, do you? Some of the worst monsters I met never wanted power," they said. "It just came to them upon a tide of accidents. They did such awful things with it, because they could not admit they were doing them." "What does that make you?" Arya asked quietly. "You wanted songs. You wanted a crown. And I learned what both of those cost," Sansa said. "Why are you really here?" Arya opened her mouth, closed it. The list felt like a weight in her pocket. "To see if I was on your list," Sansa said. Arya's silence was answer enough. Sansa's jaw clenched. For a moment it seemed she would look away. Then she forced herself to meet Arya's eyes. "Am I?" "I haven't decided," Arya said. "Decided?" Sansa's laugh this time was full of disbelief. "Am I on trial? Who else is in this court of yours? Bran? Tyrion? The gods?" "Everyone," Arya said, because it was true. "Anyone who holds the lives of others in their hands. Anyone whose decisions ripple." "And who holds yours?" Sansa stepped forward, anger catching fire. "Who judges the judge, Arya? Who weighs your kills?" "The god," Arya said. "Which one?" Sansa snapped. "Don't say the many-faced god, as if you can wrap all their cruelty into one convenient shadow and call it balance. You never cared for gods. That's one thing we had in common." "He cares for me," Arya said. "At least as much as any ever did." "Oh, he cares for your knife hand," Sansa said coldly. "He cares for the fear you spread. Gods love fear. It makes men build temples. You're doing someone's work, but I doubt it's the small folks." Arya flinched. The weirwood leaves whispered overhead. The carved face watched them both, mouth a bleeding gash. "You think the North is better with a queen," Arya said. "You think the South is better with a king. That's what I came to see, whether you're right." "And if I am not?" Sansa asked. Arya's hand moved, almost of its own accord. towards the knife at her belt. She had not meant to bring one. She never needed them, not now. But habit was a hard cloak to shed. There it was, the unseen weight under her cloak. "If you're not," she said, "someone else will take it from you, or I will." Sansa studied her. There was no fear in her face, only a kind of weary sadness. "You think you can kill me," she said. "I know I can," Arya replied. "Maybe," Sansa said, "if I were a person. But I am not really. I am a crown. I am a story they tell themselves about what the North is. You can slit my throat and someone will put that story on their own head. It might be someone worse. I will kill them too. And the next." Sansa's voice rose. "And the next? Will you go on until there is no one left who wants to make decisions? Who decides then, Arya? The loudest voice in the hall? The last woman with stores of grain? Power does not vanish because you cut a few heads. It shifts, it seeps, it finds cracks." Arya thought of water freezing, expanding, splitting stone. "Maybe I will break the stone," she said, "and leave us all standing in the river while it floods." Sansa shot back. She took a breath, visibly reining herself in. "Listen to me. The things you want. No more heads rolling for lords' quarrels. No more villages burned for glory. Those are the things I want. You know that. But I learned one thing very young. Tearing down is easier than building. You told me that once, when you knocked down my snow castle in the yard. You're still angry about that?" Arya could not help it. Sansa huffed a laugh despite herself. "Yes, and no. I know why you did it. I was so proud of my little turrets. You saw how fragile they were. You saw what the first real snowstorm would do to them." She stepped closer. "If you must knock down my castle now, at least have the decency to admit you cannot build something in its place. Don't pretend you are doing the work of so. Me God, don't hide behind a mask." Arya's throat felt tight. "This is bigger than you," she said, because she needed it to be true. "Bigger than me. Bigger than the North." "It always is," Sansa said softly. "That's what every tyrant says. I am sorry you think you must be one. I am sorrier that you are very good at it." They stood very close now. Arya could see the fine lines at the corner of Sansa's eyes, the small scar along her jaw where something had once cut her and healed. She could smell wool and leather and the faintest hint of winter roses, from some psalm scent Sansa must still use on her skin. "I will not step down because you threaten me," Sansa said. "I will not be Cersei. If I step down, it will be because the people ask it. If you kill me before then, I understand. I would rather die by your hand than some man's who never cared for me at all." Arya's eyes stung. "Do you want me to?" she asked, hoarse. Sansa closed her eyes, then opened them. "No," she said. "I want you to come home. I want you to sit by my fire and tell me about the edge of the world. I want to remember how to be girls together." Her mouth trembled. "But wanting is not for queens. It's not for assassins either," Arya said bleakly. "Then we are both cursed." Sansa lifted a hand. After a heartbeat's hesitation, she laid it on Arya's cheek. Arya's body tensed as if for a blow. The hand was warm. The touch was light. "You smell like the sea," Sansa murmured. "And ash, and something else I don't have a name for. With all your books?" Arya managed. "I do not have the right books," Sansa said. "Will you kill me?" Arya reached up. Her fingers closed around Sansa's wrist. She could break it. She could bring her other hand up, under the jaw a quick twist. She knew the angles. She had done it 100 times. Sansa did not move. Her pulse beat fast under Arya's fingers. No crown, Arya thought, ruthless. No queen. No story in the hall. Just a body on the cold ground and men scrambling to fill the empty space. She let go. "Not today," she said. Sansa's breath shuddered out. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't," Arya said. "Don't thank me for something I might do tomorrow." "Then thank you for coming," Sansa said. "Even if you go again. It's good to see you." Arya stepped back. The air between them cooled. "I will be watching," she said. Sansa's mouth quirked. You always did. Arya left Winterfell that evening under a lowering sky. As she rode out with a merchant caravan, the wind carried the distant sound of wolves howling. She did not cross Sansa's name off her stone. She did not circle it either. She let it sit there, a question. It was easier with others. The Vale Lord, who had grown up under a succession of regents, had learned too well the lesson that other people's decisions were dangerous. He signed every document reluctantly, asked for new reports, stalled. In the vacuum his caution left, his knights grew bold. They squeezed the mountain clans, taxed the valleys until the small folk ground their teeth in their sleep. When he died quietly in his bed in his sleep, a cup of wine untouched beside him, no one mourned loudly. His younger sister, who had taken to riding the borders herself while he hesitated, stepped into his place with far fewer scruples about acting. In Dorne, the prince who had dallied in King's Landing as a youth returned with lofty ideas and a taste for plays. He had little patience for the slow tie of custom that held his desert together. He pushed too far, too fast, trying to reshape everything at once. When he fell from his horse during a game of spears and broke his neck, some said it was a sign from the old Rhoynar gods to slow. His younger cousin, more cautious, listened. Gendry was hardest after Sansa. She found him in his forge at Storm's End, stripped to the waist as he hammered out a plowshare. He had told a messenger he would see the northern envoy when he was finished with his work. He meant the steel, not the papers on his table. He had filled out. The lines of his shoulders were thicker. He had a small scar over one brow she did not remember. His hair was as black and stubborn as ever. She watched from the doorway, hiding behind the face of the very envoy he expected, until he looked up, wiping sweat from his eyes. "Lady Smallwood," he began. "Sorry to keep you waiting, my lady, but..." She let the face fall away. He froze. The hammer slipped from his fingers and clanged on the floor. It didn't matter. The world was already noisy with the forging fire and the sea beyond. "Arya," he whispered. They stared at each other across the red glow. "You're supposed to call me milady," she said, because it was easier than anything else. A laugh burst out of him, startled and raw. He crossed the space in 3 strides and pulled her into a hug that threatened to crack her ribs. She froze, then let herself lean into it for the space of 3 breaths. His skin was hot and slick with sweat. He smelled of smoke and iron. It was like stepping into a familiar dream. It was like putting her hand on the haft of a sword she'd thought lost. Then she pushed him back. "You're lordly now," she said. "Not just King Robert's bastard anymore." He shrugged, that same awkward roll of shoulders. "Didn't ask for it. No one ever does," she said. "Except the ones who shouldn't have it. I only took it so I could feed people," he said heatedly. Storm's End was empty. The lands around were worse. "I know what it's like to be hungry, Arya. I couldn't stand seeing it again. You did more than feed them." She gestured toward the half-made plowshare. "You're making a new world here." He flushed. "I'm trying," he said, the same words everyone used. She walked the battlements with him that afternoon. He told her about crop rotations and new smithies, about how he'd broken up some of the old lands to give to small folk who'd fought in the war, about his arguments with the rest of the Stormlords. "They think a man's worth is the same as the size of his hall," he muttered. "I tell them they'll starve in big empty rooms if they don't change." "You sound like a lord," she teased. He grimaced. "You sound like my conscience." She did not sleep that night. Instead, she walked the halls of Storm's End in bare feet, silent as a shadow, feeling the old stones under her skin. Once, this place had belonged to a different Baratheon, one whose choices had burned half a world. Once, she had seen its banners coming to Winterfell and thought only of excitement. Now it was another knot in her stone. Gendry would never be Stannis. He would never be Robert. He did not hunger for more than he had, but his title gave him weight in all the little ways. In letters he wrote to King's Landing, in the way smaller lords watched him, in the way the small folk here would follow his lead. If she killed him, someone else would take his place. Some second cousin with a sense of entitlement, perhaps, or a knight with more ambition than sense. They might do worse things with the same tools. She stood outside his chamber door for a long time in a servant's face, listening to his breathing on the other side. Once it hitched as if in a dream. Once he muttered something she could not catch. She lifted her hand to the latch. She lowered it. She went instead to his desk. The moonlight through the narrow window lit the stack of parchment there. Tallies, letters, somebody's rough map of new fields. She took out her own ink and wrote, in a firm, unfamiliar hand, "Be careful where you lend your name. Some thrones have sharper spikes than you can see." She hesitated, then added, in a cramped scrawl that tugged at old muscle, "Keep your promises. To them, to yourself." She left it there. The next day she was gone. Years stretched and her legend grew. She heard the stories sometimes as she walked under borrowed faces. A shadow in the corner of a queen's eye, a whisper in a priest's dream, a hand that nudged a candle just so. Some said she was a ghost left over from the Night King's fall, punishment for those who forgot the dead. Some said she was an old god returned, older than the Seven, older than the weirwoods, older than the drowned god's waves. Some said she worked for the Iron Bank or for King Bran or for no one at all. The truth was simpler and more terrible. She worked for work's own sake. There were successes. There were failures. A war she had tried to forestall between two border lords in the Reach and the Westerlands broke out despite the poisoned letter she had sent. Each side convinced the other had struck first. A scheme by a minor maester to overturn the Citadel's hierarchy was stopped when she cut the head of the conspiracy, only to find 3 others growing. The faith of the Seven grew nervous as its septons began to die in ones and twos. A kindly old man in a village who had started teaching children that the gods were stories and should be taken lightly. A high septon whose gentle sermons about forgiving debts had paved the way for a new kind of exploitation. She stepped carefully there. Religion was a wheel too big for one knife, but she pricked it where she could. Bran watched. She felt him sometimes, in the rustle of leaves, in the way ravens' heads tilted. Once, in Old Town, she woke from a dream in which she had been walking through the library of the night. Shelves stretched endlessly. Every book she opened contained her own face, wearing someone else's. A boy with Bran's eyes sat at a table in the center, reading her like an account. "You are thinning," he said without looking up. "I am working," she replied. "What happens when you have cut every head you can reach?" he asked, turning a page. "When even the small folk begin to tell tales of you around their fires, and mothers frighten their daughters into obedience with your name? I will stop," she said. "You will not know how," he said gently. She woke with sweat on her brow. Her stone filled with names, emptied, filled again. She changed stones when they cracked. The House of Black and White took her reports without comment. The girl who had called her Faceless Queen appeared from time to give her new threads to follow, new clients whose pleas aligned with her broader work. "This one asks for the death of a lord who took his daughter and left their fields barren," she would say, tracing the lines of the plea with one finger. "That may be your work. That may not." Arya looked at the pleas and thought of scales, of snow, of ash. She did not see Sansa again for a very long time. When she did, the queen in the north wore no crown. It was deep winter. Snow lay thick on the roofs of White Harbor. The Mander was a slow, sludging thing under its skin of ice. Sails in the harbor sagged under the weight of frost. People moved quickly through the streets, heads down, breath steaming. The news had come by Raven a month before. Bran the Broken, king of the 6 kingdoms, had died in his sleep. His heart stopped. There had been no dragons, no assassination, no blaze of prophecy. The old maesters shook their heads and said his broken body had simply run its course. In the south, there would be councils and speeches and new crowns. In the north, the ravens brought Sansa's response. The north remained as it was. It would hear what the south decided and choose what to do in its own time. Arya found Sansa at the harbor, standing on the quay with her cloak pulled tight. She had not hidden herself this time. Her face was her own, thin with the same slow erosion of years, eyes sharper. Sansa looked as if she had been carved from the winter as the stones around her. Her hair was mostly bound beneath a fur-lined hood. The strands that escaped were streaked with silver. She wore no crown. Only the old Stark brooch gleamed at her throat. "You came," Sansa said, without turning her head. "You called," Arya replied.
"Isen no raven."
But she smiled faintly. "I suppose it does not matter. You hear other calls." "The wind," Arya said. "The dead. Gossip. Always gossip." Sansa's breath puffed white. "He is gone. I know." "He told me he saw you sometimes," Sansa said. "In dreams. In birds' eyes. He said he could never tell whether you were going to cut a thread or mend it." Arya did not answer. "He also said you were very tired," Sansa added. "I don't look tired," Arya said. "No," Sansa said softly. "You never did. You just looked thinner, spread out, like butter on too much bread." "That's Sam's metaphor," Arya said, before she could stop herself. Sansa huffed a laugh. "Sam's, then. He's good with those." They stood side by side. The water lapped below. A gull cried overhead, ragged. "What will you do?" Arya asked. Sansa's shoulders lifted, fell. "I will not go south," she said. "They scarcely needed me while Bran sat his chair. They need me less now. They can argue among themselves without feeling his eyes. I will send my envoys. I will barter and threaten as I have always done. But I am too old to sit another king's council and smile while they speak of grain as if it is theory." "And in the north?" Arya asked. Sansa's gloved hands tightened on the quay's edge. "I will do what I've always done," she said. "I will keep them fed. I will keep them alive. When it is time for another to take the crown, I will train them and then I will take it off." She glanced sideways. "Will that satisfy your court?" "I have no court," Arya said. "You have something," Sansa said. "I have heard the stories. We all have. There are men who refuse the hand's pin when it is offered now. There are lords who turn down small offices because they have seen what happens to those who stand too high." "That was the point," Arya said. "Was it?" Sansa asked. "I thought the point was to protect the small folk from the worst of us. Now some of them are afraid to step up at all, in case the shadows come for them." "Do they step up for the right reasons?" Arya asked. "Because they want to serve? Or because they want the songs?" "Both," Sansa said. "Always both. We are not clean creatures, Arya. We are muddled. You know that." Arya closed her eyes briefly. The wind came off the water, cold and salt. "I have made mistakes," she said. The words felt like stones dropped in deep water. "Then you are less like a god than some say," Sansa replied. "That's something." "They call me queen," Arya said. "They call you many things," Sansa said. "Here, they still call you my sister, when they dare to speak your name." She hesitated. "Are you here to kill me?" Arya opened her eyes. Sansa looked back steadily. "No," Arya said. "I think you're doing as well as anyone can. Better than I could." "Is that approval?" Sansa asked, arching a brow. "No," Arya said. Then, after a heartbeat, "Yes." Sansa's smile this time was small and real. "That may be the highest praise I ever earn," she said. "I'll take it." They fell silent again. "You could stop," Sansa said eventually. "You know that, don't you?" "Stop what?" "Being the knife in everyone's stories." Sansa's breath puffed. "Let men and women make their own mistakes. Let them learn. Let the world wobble a little without your hand against it. If I stop, men like Cersei will rise again." "Possibly," Sansa said, "though I like to think we've learned a few things. Some of us, at least. But even if they do, you cannot spend your whole life punishing the world for what it did to us." "That's not what I'm doing," Arya said sharply. "No." Sansa laid a hand lightly on her arm. "Then what are you doing?" Arya looked out over the harbor. Ships bobbed, their masts black against the white sky. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the western sea stretched, indifferent. "I am doing my work," she said. "And when the work is all you are?" Sansa asked. Arya had no answer to that. That night she dreamt of the house of black and white. She walked its halls with bare feet. The faces watched. The pool gleamed black. The girl sat on the rim, swinging her legs like a child. "You have done much," she said. "The stories of you have reached even here. They have added more candles to our offerings." "I did not do it for the candles," Arya said. "Of course not," the girl said. "You did it because you could not bear not to. That is the same reason most men and women do anything in the end." Arya looked up at the walls. Some of the faces were new. Some were old enough that she recognized them. "Is it enough?" she asked. "Have I killed enough of them?" "Enough what?" The girl countered. "Kings, queens, lords, priests, powers." The girl considered. "You have changed the rules of the game," she said. "Fewer men reach too high now. Those who do sometimes look over their shoulders first. That is something." "Is it enough?" Arya insisted. The girl's smile was sad. "Not if you expect the game to end," she said. "Games do not end. They only change players." She hopped down. "You have taken many names from your stone. Perhaps it is time to take one back." Arya's hand went to her chest. Felt hollow as always. "I don't know if I remember it," she said. "You do," the girl said. "You never truly gave it up. You only pretended. But if you stop pretending, you may find you cannot do this work the same way any longer." "Good," Arya said. The girl cocked her head. "Is it?" Arya woke with her heart pounding. Spring came tea that year. When the snows finally began to melt, slow and reluctant, a raven found her in a nameless village in the Reach. The bird landed on the windowsill of the room she had rented as an old woman. Its eyes were very dark. She took the scrap of parchment from its leg. There were only 4 words. "Come home, little sister." The hand was Sansa's. The raven's eyes were Bran's. She went north. She rode this time as herself. No masks, no borrowed gait. People stared at her on the road sometimes, then looked quickly away. They must have recognized her from tales or from nothing at all. She felt raw, uncovered. At Winterfell, the gate guards straightened as if a wind had hit them. "Lady Arya," one of them stammered, then corrected himself. "Your Grace." "No, milady." Arya is fine," she said. "Open the gate." In the great hall, Sansa stood waiting. There were new lines on her face. Her hands were empty. The sword lay on the table between them. Arya looked at it with something like awe. It was shorter than she remembered. The grip worn smooth by someone else's hand. The name rose in her throat like a long-buried bone. "Needle," she whispered. "I fetched it," Sansa said, "from that inn, on the quiet isle. The elder brother there said he knew you'd come for it eventually. He thought perhaps it should be sooner rather than later." Arya stepped forward. Her fingers hovered over the hilt. "You went there yourself?" "No," Sansa said dryly. "I sent an envoy. I have to stay put sometimes, you know. Queens don't roam as they please." "You're not wearing a crown," Arya said. "I told you," Sansa replied. "I take it off when I must. Today, I am your sister." Arya wrapped her hand around Needle's hilt. The wood was familiar. The balance sang up her arm. She lifted it. The hall seemed to narrow, all its banners fading to shadow. Her name came back to her in a rush. Arya Stark of Winterfell, who had never been no one. Arya, who had run with wolves and eaten with killers and learned to be a ghost. Arya, who had pushed herself into stories to survive and then cut her way out. Arya, who had killed a king of ice and gods knew how many men. Arya, who had left a trail of empty chairs behind her that still made her wake with her heart racing. She swayed. Sansa's hand was suddenly at her elbow. "Easy," Sansa murmured. "It's only a sword." "It's not," Arya said, and heard the quaver in her own voice. "No," Sansa agreed. "It never was. You asked what would happen. A voice said in her head, the kindly man's or the girl's, or perhaps her own. What if you unmade every major power in Westeros? She saw them, all the chairs she had toppled. The drowned queen, the broken banker, the hesitant lord, the priest and the prince and the nameless men who had tried to climb back onto the wheel she had been hacking at. The gaps they had left, filled by others, sometimes better, sometimes worse. The fear she had sown, the worship. Did you? Sansa asked softly. Arya blinked. Did I what? Unmake them, Sansa said. The powers. No, Arya said. I broke some. I bent others. I scared the rest. But the world still needs someone to sort the grain, to judge the quarrels. It still wants stories about who we are. You were right. All I did was change which stories frighten children. Sansa's eyes were bright. That's not nothing. It's not enough, Arya said. It never will be, Sansa replied. That's the secret. The work never ends. We just pass it on when we're too tired to lift it anymore. Arya looked at Needle. I could go back, she said, to Bravos. Give them my face. Hang it on a wall. Let someone else be the hand in the dark. You could, Sansa said. Do you want to? Arya thought of the Hall of Faces, of the girl on the pool's rim, of the kindly man dipping his fingers in black water. No, she said. I think I've given them enough. Her hand tightened on Needle. I think it's time I did something smaller. Sansa's smile was crooked. Smaller? Not the whole world, Arya said. Just here, for a little while. She laughed, surprised at herself. Maybe I'll teach your guards not to stand like spears in the yard. They would benefit from it, Sansa said. Some of them are more show than sword. And then, when your chosen heir takes your crown, Arya went on, words coming faster now. Maybe I'll finally go west properly, not to find an edge, just to see what's there, without thinking I have to kill it. Sansa's shoulders loosened. I would like you to stay, she said, for a time, however long you can bear it. You don't have to be the faceless queen here. I don't know how to be anything else, Arya said. You were a lot of things before you were that, Sansa said. You were my annoying little sister. You were father's daughter. You were the girl who wouldn't sit still. She touched the sword lightly. You can be some of them again. Arya swallowed. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters. In the courtyard, she heard the thump of practiced swords, the shouts of men. You know they'll still tell stories, she said. About me, down south, in Essos, everywhere. They'll say the faceless queen vanished. They'll say she waits. Let them, Sansa said. Stories are all we ever really leave behind. You can't kill them, Arya. You can only choose which ones you feed. And which I stop feeding, Arya murmured. She slid Needle into its old sheath at her hip. The weight of it there was strange and right all at once. Sansa leaned in and pressed her forehead briefly to Arya's. Welcome home, she said. Arya closed her eyes. For the first time in a long time, she let herself feel the shape of that word. Home. A place that was not a hall of faces or a ship's narrow bunk or an inn's creaking bed. A place where she did not any. It to be queen or ghost or blade. She opened her eyes. Show me the yard, she said. Those guards won't know what hit them. Sansa laughed, bright and startled. Come on, then. They walked out of the hall together, shoulder to shoulder, into a winter that felt, for the first time in years, like something that might be survived without fire or shadow. The snow crunched under their boots. The sky was the color of steel. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, and another answered. In time, the stories would shift again. The faceless queen would become a half-forgotten nightmare, a threat muttered to children who lied too prettily. New powers would rise and fall. New lists would be written by other angry hands. The game would go on in different forms. But for a while, in a fortress of stone and snow in the north, a woman who had once been no one and everyone at once taught boys and girls to move their feet, to keep their blades up, to watch all corners. She told them, when they asked, that the only throne worth sitting was the one inside their own bones. She told them, when they pressed, that no one was untouchable. And sometimes, late at night, when the halls were quiet and the godswood's branches rattled against the sky, she would stand before the heart tree with her hands in her pockets and talk, quietly, to a brother who could no longer watch and to a girl she had once been. "I did not kill every king," Arya Stark would say, her breath white on the air. "I did not end every game. I only showed them that the pieces can be knocked over." The weirwood's face did not change. The leaves whispered. Far away, in a city of canals and fog, in a house whose doors were always open, a man with kindly eyes would pause in his prayers and smile very slightly. Somewhere even farther, beyond the maps and songs, beyond where the Titan's horn could be heard, waves broke on a shore no one had yet drawn. One day, perhaps, a small ship would appear there, carrying a woman with gray eyes and too many shadows. On that day, in that place, there might be no kings and no queens, no crowns and no lists. There would only be new faces, new names, and the quiet, endless work of choosing what to do with them. Until then, in Westeros, winter came and went, as it always had, as it always would. Men and women lived and ruled and died. Some remembered, when they reached for power, the stories of the Faceless Queen who had walked unseen among them and taken it away. And somewhere in the north, a sword named for sewing sat above a hearth, waiting, its point still keen, its work, like the world's, never entirely done.